Welcome to Module 1 of Course 8, where we explore the importance of detailed reports and documentation in cybersecurity operations. I am Bayo Ido. This course is titled Cybersecurity Reporting and Documentation, and it's all about helping you to understand why writing things down in the world of cybersecurity isn't just a boring administrative task. It's absolutely essential. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to, number one, understand why cybersecurity documentation plays such a huge role in managing risk and staying compliant with laws and regulations. Number two, you'll be able to recognize the various kinds of cybersecurity reports and why they matter in your day-to-day operations. Also, you will learn some best practices like practical and real-world methods for keeping your documentation both accurate and useful. And finally, you'll be able to evaluate how having strong reporting processes in place actually makes your entire organization more secure. So let's kick things off by talking about what cybersecurity documentation really is and why it's so important. Let's look at a few core reasons why documentation should be the front and center in every security operation. First up, we look at incident tracking and response. When a security event happens, documentation allows your team to track exactly what happened or what occurred, when it occurred, and how it unfolded. It's like having a play-by-play breakdown of a football game. So you can see who did what, when, and how the other team scored. Without this, you're essentially flying blind. Next, we have compliance and regulatory requirements. Think of regulations like GDPR in Europe, HIPAA for healthcare in the US, or PCI DSS for anyone handling credit card data. All of these laws require detailed documentation of security-related activities. If you don't have your records in order, you are not just out of compliance, you could be facing serious legal and financial consequences. Another major point is continuous security improvement. Documentation helps you identify where your security posture is strong and where it has holes. It's like keeping a workout log. You can't improve your health if you don't know what exercises you're doing and how you're progressing with them. And finally, legal and audit purposes. If you ever end up in court or under regulatory investigation, your documentation can be your best defense at that point, or it could be your worst liability. Think of it like a black box on an airplane. It tells the story of what happened, right? And whether your team followed procedure. So let's look at the impact of poor documentation in cybersecurity breach. So now let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine a company that gets hit by ransomware. They don't have clear documentation of the previous vulnerabilities and how past incidents were handled. When investigators step in, they find inconsistencies, gaps in the response plan, and no clear log of system activity. What could have been a manageable situation, it turns out into a full-blown crisis, not because of the attack itself, but because of poor documentation. Now, let's explore how we report security incidents. What should an incident report contain? Here are the key elements every solid incident report should include. Number one, incident summary. This is your headline. What happened? When did it happen? And how was it discovered? Think of it like the opening paragraph of a news article. It sets the scene. Number two, timeline of events. Break down the attack step by step. For example, you could say 3:15 p.m. suspicious login detected. 3:20 p.m. unauthorized access confirmed. 3:45 p.m. firewall rules updated. With this, it creates a forensic map of the event. And then next is impact analysis. What systems were affected? Was any data compromised? Did operations shut down? You're basically answering the question, how bad was it? And then next is response actions taken. What did your team do in response? Did they isolate servers, alert law enforcement, restore from backups? This shows how well or how poorly the team responded. And then another one is root cause analysis. You want to get to the why of the matter. Was it a phishing email, an unpatched vulnerability? Think of this like a doctor finding the illness behind the symptoms. And the last one is lessons learned and recommendations. This is the heart of continuous improvement. What can we do next time to either prevent the incident or respond faster? Let's take a look at an example, Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack that happened in 2021. Okay, the attack was caused by a single compromised VPN password. Had there been better documentation of who had access and when those credentials were last reviewed, this might have been avoided or at least caught a little earlier. Now, let's now turn our focus on vulnerability assessment documentation. So we shift gears a little bit and talk about how we document the weaknesses in our systems before they get exploited. What does a good vulnerability assessment report include? Number one, asset inventory. This is the what, meaning that what systems, applications, or devices were tested. If you don't know what you have, you cannot protect it. And then vulnerabilities found. You organize this by severity: critical, high, medium, and low. Think of it like a doctor that's triaging ER patients. Some issues are life-threatening and others can actually wait. And then the third one is exploitability. Can these vulnerabilities be taken advantage of remotely? If so, you've got a bigger problem. It's one thing if the law requires something to be physically present, but if it's internet facing, your risk skyrockets. And then the next one is remediation recommendations. For each issue, what's the fix? Maybe it's a patch. Maybe it's a configuration change. This is your action plan. And finally, testing methodology. Okay, what tools and frameworks were used? Maybe it was Nessus or OpenVAS or Qualys. This helps others to understand how the data was collected. Let's look at another example, the Equifax breach. Equifax is a cautionary tale to all of us. The breach occurred because of an unpatched Apache Struts vulnerability. The vulnerability was known and documented, but no one followed up. So a lack of consistent vulnerability documentation and follow-up led to a massive data breach affecting over 140 million people. Let's now look at compliance documentation, okay, through the lenses of compliance. That's following the rules. The key compliance regulations and documentation requirements are, we're going to break that down now, what different laws require in terms of documentation. So we look at the regulation, the industry that they play in, and the documentation required. The very first one is the GDPR, which plays in the global data protection arena. It's a European Union law. And documentation required here would be incident logs, breach notifications, and risk assessments. And then we have HIPAA, which is a US law, and it plays in the healthcare industry here. And the documentation required here is access logs, risk assessment, and security policies. And then we have the PCI DSS, which plays in the payment security area. This actually ascertains payment security for people or companies or organizations that are accepting credit card and debit card payments. And the documentation required here will be vulnerability scans, penetration test report, system configurations. And the last one we look at is SOX, which is Sarbanes-Oxley, which is also a law in the US and it plays in the financial industry. And the documentation required here will be access control logs, security event report. Each regulation has its own checklist, but the bottom line is if you don't have it documented, then you didn't do it. Let's now look at an example of GDPR compliance failures and fines. We take a look at companies like British Airways and Marriott that were fined hundreds of millions of dollars, not just for having breaches, but for failing to document their security measures and notify users in time. Again, bad documentation equals big fines. Let's now wrap this whole thing up, okay? So with some key takeaways. Number one, cybersecurity documentation isn't just red tape. It's a core part of managing risk and staying compliant. Number two, your incident reports should clearly map out the timeline, the response, and lessons learned. The clearer your documentation is, the faster your team can act next time. Number three, vulnerability assessments should always include prioritization, remediation steps, and testing methodology. And finally, when it comes to compliance, structured documentation isn't optional. It's what keeps you on the right side of the law. So now it's your turn. Let me give you a challenge here. So the challenge is you're going to use what you've learned in this module to develop a cybersecurity documentation template that fits your organization or your would-be organization. Think about incident reporting, vulnerability assessment, and compliance tracking. Okay. Well, great job finishing module 1. You ready for module 2, where we look into the types of reports and documentation utilized in cybersecurity operations? If you're ready, come on, let's go.